Lovely to see you.
You too.
What a character study. I couldn't decide if she was a sociopath or not.
Well, there's sociopathic elements there for sure. You know, she's a completely driven and obsessive character whose, you know, moral and emotional considerations are simply kind of cast aside in pursuit of what she does, which would be an interesting film. It wouldn't be an interesting film in the end if those ideas were not challenged or not, you know, developed in the course of the story. But yeah, it is first and foremost a character study of a pretty extraordinary, unusual creature and in a very unusual world.
Right. I love the story about the screenwriter. He was some guy living in South Korea, his first screenplay. It's extraordinary.
Yes, I mean, it's not quite as unlikely. I mean, the exoticism of the setting is kind of irresistible. I mean, he, you know, very smart guy, as you might imagine, but operating right outside the system, though he, you know, he's very film literate, and he studied law at university. I asked him why he studied law particularly, and he said, because that's the quickest way for me to pay off my college debt, because he imagined he would be able to walk into a high-paying job, not walk into, but hopefully get a high-paying job that would minimize the amount of time he had to spend in that world. But that world, of course, informs this movie hugely. He knows how those kind of places operate, and he immediately removed himself to the other side of the world. That's partly for family reasons as well, so that, and taught in an elementary school in South Korea, taught himself the language, so that he had time to write, and that's what happened.
It's a pretty remarkable script, yeah.
It is, yeah.
Now, obviously, you worked with Jessica Chastain on a previous film, which was also a bit of a thriller, but you were thinking of her as you read this script?
Completely. By page 1 to certainly no later than 8. I mean, it's sort of, that sounds like a kind of opportunistic thing to say, but it isn't, because she and I have been, you know, literally sifting through material since we made The Debt, looking for a project to do together. And she's often sent me things that she was interested in, but for whatever reason we just haven't been able to make that happen in terms of schedule or, you know, similar reaction to the material. And I sent her this literally as soon as I'd finished it, and said, you have to take a look at this one, because this is, you know, the part in my view belongs to her. I like to feel that I got that quality in every aspect of every cast of every film I make. I kind of believe that the part should be that person, and in this case it was a kind of a no-brainer. I mean, she has a perfect skill set for it, I think.
Well, we've seen very intelligent and accomplished women, but this character is so tough. I mean, it's almost...
she's... You know, all the adjectives you would use to describe her would not be out of place if it were a man. They seem unusual and surprising because she's a woman. But definitely that's one of the surprising things about the film, a film that has a lot of surprises in it, I think. Yeah, she's right out there. She's right out there, and she's slightly breathtaking, the way she is able to set about doing what she does, and the kind of coolness and which is an approving word, and coldness, which is not necessarily an approving term, is part of what makes her so fascinating. I mean, she's wildly flawed and kind of downright questionable most of the time in the story, but then that becomes the story itself, and that's one of the things that I think is so unusual about it, so compelling about it.
Right. She's so compelling to watch. How did you and Jessica work on the arc? Because from the very beginning, you're waiting for the crack. You're waiting for that moment of vulnerability.
Well, that process happened when I first engaged with the script. So Jonathan Pereira and I worked on the script together for about 6 months. It was already a very, very, very strong script and an amazingly compelling read. It probably had to go through its next iteration in order to, if it went along like this, but that's not to say it was shallow or uninteresting. It was, the narrative itself is very complex and tremendously kind of gripping, I think, and surprising. But it's the undertow, the emotional and moral undertow that the piece develops was really where I thought the film needed or promised greater investigation of that. And so the piece was very, very carefully marinated by me and him in that process to kind of pull that out. Because, she's almost infallible at the beginning of the story. She takes on, of course, an assignment which is famous for there never being any kind of political movement in that zone. And watching how she responds to that is the fascination of the film, I think. Jessica never pulled back for a second from, said, well, wow, I'm pretty unsympathetic in this scene. It's not in her vocabulary. She doesn't think about that, doesn't care about it. She's only interested in how the scene is working dramatically and in human terms. And if those things can be got right, then she's happy to give herself to it completely. And obviously there's an element, a great deal of trust between the two of us at this point, because we've been there, and there's great respect on my part to her, and I think probably coming back. So, it was fantastic to work on from that point of view.